Well, joining me now is the editor-in-chief of Semafor. It is Ben Smith. I've known him in so many of your iterations. I have multiple iterations.
Many of yours, yeah.
Exactly. This is the world that we occupy in media and journalism. But look, Semafor is what? Are you celebrating your third birthday? Pretty close?
I will be, yeah.
Yeah?
Pretty close.
What is it today that you didn't expect it to be nearly 3 years ago? Because I find it interesting. The goal was smart information for the English speaking world, pretty much, right? Is that
I'll take
a
it,
good
yeah.
one-line explainer?
Yeah.
So where are we in your journey 3 years later with Justin Smith, who he and I have sons who just graduated high school together. So the insular nature of the media in Washington and New York is going to come through in this conversation. But where are you today, and where did you think you would be 3 years ago?
Yeah. Well, congratulations on that, Chuck. And also,
No,
on your ascent from being the editor of the Hotline, which is when I
there
first
you
knew
go.
you. And it is, like we both sort of lived through an unbelievably crazy period of history in our profession, where like probably both of us would have been, had we met, had we been 30 years earlier and met 30 years ago, we would have basically been inside giant organizations, rising in the ranks, one hopes,
Right.
for that
And that's
entire
just now-
period. And instead, we've just done
Yeah.
a series of insane different things.
And sort of ridden the
yeah.
wave of, well, as I say about the story of media over the last 100 years is new technology, fragmentation, consolidation, new technology, fragmentation, consolidation. And you and I have lived through now arguably we're now on our second fragmentation period, right? Internet 1.0 was fragmentation number one. That was sort of what the hotline was. That was in some ways the end of 1.0 is what Politico came in and did that. And now streaming and where we are now is sort of fragmentation, independent journalism, whatever you want to call it, is fragmentation 2.0. And in some ways, that's what Semafor, right? You guys are trying to challenge traditional media. I'm trying to do it in my own way. And here we are. And as I joke, and I think you guys probably feel the same way, the goal is to be a consolidator, not to get consolidated. But if you get consolidated, that might not be so bad either.
That's a very, very good summary, right? And you sort of, I think you sort of left the old thing at the last possible moment to get off the ship and are now, like, I think here just in time to blow up and get consolidated. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that. I do feel as if I grabbed the last lifeboat.
Exactly.
There are times I feel that way.
Anyway. I think, Semafor, we launched, I think, as people were saying, hey, the web as we knew it and social media as we knew it don't seem to be working quite so well as we thought. And with a thesis that we're going to have to reach people one-to-one. And also that convening at events are going to be a big part of this business and sort of the core of how you reach people one-to-one. That second thing has just been truer than we could have imagined. Like we built these really, in a short period of time, pretty huge events. We have a Davos competitor in Washington called the World Economy Summit, which will gather. Maybe I think it was the biggest gathering of CEOs in America this year when we did it in April. It's gonna be a lot bigger next year. And so I think the notion that you could sort of build a news organization whose core was convening was a little exotic and has really been truer than we expected in a way. Like we said it, but now we have that's really what we're doing. And then the notion that in a world with where social media is really untrustworthy and polarized, where the web is really untrustworthy and polarized, that we could build something. And I think maybe more than we expected that there's a group of people, and it's particularly people who make decisions in business and government elsewhere, who just can't afford to be lied to, because for them news is a tool they use to make decisions. And most of the rest of news consumers, I think the thesis of a lot of media companies is, this is entertainment for people. It doesn't have to be true. It has to be emotionally engaging. Yeah. And so I think there's a real split there. And we definitely have taken that former path of we're news for people who really probably know what their philosophy of the world is, and we're probably not going to change that, but we can inform them. We can open that. We can provide different perspectives and different legitimate points of view and tell them even what people who they despise think about this, and that that's a really valuable service. We can tell them, we can separate news from opinion. They're not out shopping for new points of view on the world or for new opinions for themselves. They're trying to understand what's going on.
You know what I find refreshing in what you're doing is that it's all free. There's no subscription. Yeah, right. And I mean this. There's no subscription at all. And I know you've said, well, maybe in the future there'll be a subscription model, but I am a huge believer that paywalls are not going to solve the information ecosystem problem. So explain why you decided to be free for all, and that you've not. I think a lot of people assume, well, you're going to be free for now, and then you're going to put up the paywall, and that's not happened. Explain that philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I don't view business models as philosophical. Like, I think in news, people tend to like talk their book. And so when I was at BuzzFeed, there was an impulse to be like, look, like, free is democratizing. And when I was at the New York Times, there's an impulse to say, look, like, you are getting great value out of this journalism. You should pay for it. And you hear people, in particular, there's a wave of people saying like subscription is the only like pure way to do journalism, because you're not corrupted by advertisers. Idea. You can really say what you think. You can be honest.
What do you mean? Ask the New York Times about their captured base of subscribers when James Bennett dared to green light an op-ed by Tom Cotton, when it was a revolt of their paid subscribers and they panicked. And you're just sitting there going, well, that's no different than advertiser capture. That's audience capture.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think basically all these models in which you are paid to do your work, like, carry with them real risks that it screws up the journalism. And the best way to get away from them is to diversify and have and to be having a bunch of different models to be. And I think my view is I'm pretty agnostic about how you pay for the journalism. I do think that we grew up in this like utopian moment of just open information and free information.
Yeah, we did.
That was new. That, I mean, and I guess in a way that probably started with television broadcast, right? Broadcast was free as a matter of like, you couldn't really figure out how to make people pay for it. I'm sure they would have if they could have. I'm sure the founders of CBS News, if they'd figured out a way to make people pay, like the BBC does, they come and they like raid your apartment and they see if you have a television, and if you do, they make you pay the license fee, and you can be in trouble if you don't. Like, that's literally how they.
That's literally how it works there, huh?
Okay. Yeah. Like the inspector will like literally bang on your door. I knew people, I lived there briefly, who would cover their televisions with like a blanket just in case, because they were trying to get out of paying whatever.
Wow, I had no idea. Wow,
it's a few pounds a year. I mean, anyway. But it's hard to make people pay for broadcast. It's sort of a technological matter. It used to be hard to make people pay for the web. Netflix and Spotify trained us all to pay. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I guess my own view is that figuring out ways to employ people to gather trustworthy information is a big crisis. The availability of trustworthy information is another big crisis, but I don't want to like make it harder to pay journalists because I am ideological about thing too, I guess is my. And for ourselves, like we think we're having a great run in the advertising business and the sponsorship business, and don't have any plans to charge subscriptions. But if I thought that it would help me hire more journalists, I would do it.
No, and I think there's a role for that. Like when I think about the whole variety of things, right? When you can't just be in one category.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, there's got to be a baseline that's available to everybody. And then, look, specialty things, specialty newsletters. Why wouldn't you want to have a subscription
for sure.
model?
And also there's more complicated things you can do. Like in your business, like I just think that like you're producing a good show that is streaming rather than television, although the production values are just as high as lots of what is on television. And in 5 minutes, like Substack TV is going to come to you and say, hey, we are television now.
Sure.
And we'd like to window your show. Like we'll pay you to get it 2 hours earlier.
Right.
Or something like that. Right?
I think the licensing, I do think that that's where we're headed. The Pat McAfee model.
Yeah, that's the model.
Steve, that's going to be the model. I mean, I assume in a year the Pod Save America boys will be on MSNBC, but they will not work. But they won't work for MSNBC. They will license them, right? They will. And this is a question, and I'm curious if you believe this. if we are in a temporary period where journalists and content creators, because it's, they're related, but they're not always one and the same. But let's put it in one that they're all going to own their own work. I look at I'm doing some work with Newsphere, which is another type
Yeah,
of
it's a
model,
really
which is
cool company, and people should
it's
download
a
that app.
it's I'm really enjoying sort of just that learning about that business model. And it's a different business model than Substack. But I do think there's going to be these different, because everybody that's on Newsphere owns their own material. They're just licensing to that platform. Do you think that I think this is a generational shift, and this will be the way it works for another decade or so? Are you convinced of this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not sure what the stakes are of whether you own, or whether do you own this hour of us talking about, not we're talking about eternal truths, so this will have value for a long time. But
Right.
much of what you talk about is stuff that isn't that interesting tomorrow because it's going to be overtaken by
Correct.
events.
Yeah.
And so I think particularly in the news business, what it is to own is a little overstated. And I think people are going to make financial decisions that are pretty boring about which pays you more. And I think
Mhm.
there's also, like, is it AI training data? That's another form of ownership and licensing that might make
Mhm.
yesterday's show have a little more value or not.
Mhm.
But I think it's interesting. I mean, it surprises me actually, but Fox Corp, the parent company of Fox
Mhm.
News, is way ahead on this. Like,
Oh, they
they
have
bought
been.
it.
Look what
They
they did
acquired.
with Fox Nation back with Tucker 3 years ago. They did this, if
Yeah,
I'm
but
not
they
mistaken.
did, like, a lot of outlets. CNN did this too. Did, like, we have an app, and it's going to be like it's going to be like the more boring stuff from Jake Tapper's book club. God bless him. It's going to be the stuff you don't want from our star talent. Um, the
Oh, Jake's
the
ears are
but
burning.
but the
But
new
anyway,
version of it is going to be, this is our best stuff in an app.
right.
And what Fox did, they acquired this right-wing podcast called Ruthless
Hmm.
yesterday. They acquired a company called Red Seat Ventures that is the production company for
Right.
Piers Morgan, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, um, Bill O'Reilly. Like, they're starting to basically take what they have, which is capital, like they can pay you a
Hmm.
bunch of money, and a real advertising sales operation.
Right.
And basically between those, and a bunch of distribution on, like, Tubi
Hmm.
and on Fox. And you're going to see these big media companies. Versant, which used to be MSNBC, is going to get around to this soon. I got to figure CNN will get around to this.
Hmm.
Say, like, oh, what we are is a collection of shows and talent. That's what we've always been. There's a new
You know what you're
arrangement of it.
describing? You know what you're describing? Clear Channel from the 90s.
Huh. Wow.
And it's where, I
That
mean, I
didn't
don't
work.
look. No, it didn't. And the point
What
is
are they
that that's
called
where
now?
iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio, right?
Yeah, they ended up trying. The point is that this is the way I've described where, so there's sort of there's late stage cable TV, right, which is essentially Fox, Versant, whatever the spinoff from Warner Brothers is going to look like, which I assume, and I guess Paramount's going to, I assume they don't spin off, they just sell to either the Warner Brothers spinoff or Versant. But it feels, it's very similar. I've described it. So I'll give you an example. You'll appreciate this. When I was at National Journal, in about 2 years before you guys showed up, when I mean you guys, Politico, or what was it called for a brief period before it was Politico,
The Capitol Leader. That was
The
before I
Capital
got
Leader,
there.
right? And there was a bunch of us that went to David Bradley and went to John Fox Sullivan at the time and said, "Hey, we should shut the magazine down and put all of the efforts into Congress Daily, which was
Mm,
a growing digital product, and Hotline. We had all
is that right?
we were and it was we had a huge debate about it, and it was sort of the
Mm,
digital side was going, hey, and but there was a bunch of revenue still available, and it
yes.
was sort of like you didn't want to just throw away that big chunk of money. I think we were talking 8 figures in revenue, and you
Yeah.
didn't want to, you couldn't, and yet everybody agreed it was a diminishing asset, that it
Yeah.
was, that eventually the trade association guys that bought all this full page advertising in the magazine were going to retire and be replaced by people who realized, no, 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 you don't want to advertise in a magazine, you want to be in the
Yeah.
digital product.
Yep.
But you never know when to say no to that cash. And that's what I think is happening with there's a certain amount of money to be made in owning some of these cable channels,
A
probably
lot
for
of
another,
money.
just like there was with FM radio in the 90s
Yeah, and
and
that's the
AM, right?
classic. Yeah,
And
that's the
it's
classic sort of innovator's dilemma, and that's why you
correct.
see the Harvard Business School graduates who run Warner Media. Oh, maybe not in that case, but basically,
Mhm.
like, the business school guys are and women are looking at these companies and saying, great, you've got a declining asset here with a lot that's throwing off a lot of cash. Like, get it off our books as quickly, sell it for a lot of money
Right.
as fast as you can, because it's going to destroy the rest of the business. It's
Yeah,
going
no,
to,
and that's exactly what Comcast and WBD's figured out, right? Holy
yeah.
shit, we need it. And Skydance is like, no, no, no,
Right.
no.
These things
We
are
don't want
like,
to have those legacy products.
right, and they're poison, actually, and we have to get rid. They're incredibly lucrative, but they're going to
Hmm.
ultimately destroy the whole company. And so, yes, and so you're just seeing people like jettison these incredibly lucrative cable networks as fast as
And,
it, like, like they have no value. It's actually kind of fascinating.
and yet, I do concur that look, not everybody's going to go away. Like what I always describe, and I'm curious if you agree with this, which is, look, mainstream. There's always a publication. There's always a version of mainstream media that's dying. Right? Life magazine was a major deal until it wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? And at some point, having a magazine with the best photos around the country no longer meant anything anymore, right? Because moving pictures was better, and we had color TV, and life
Hmm.
just sort of it stopped. And we didn't have this big pearl clutching moment where we said, "Oh my God, mainstream media is dying. Life magazine is dead." Right? Like it. The point
Yeah.
is that we just evolved, and I think we're having the same thing. Cable news is probably going to evolve out of this, and maybe not all three major networks survive in the next decade, but some of them will,
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
And then there'll be new and something on YouTube may become the thing. Maybe the Midas Touch becomes the next CBS News, right? And that there was a time when CBS was a startup,
Yeah,
right? And
totally.
was
With other
so it
competitors around it, and you didn't know which one was going to win. Yeah.
right. I joke about Meet the Press started as an advertisement for a magazine called American Mercury.
Is that right?
Yes, the radio show began. They just bought time. They bought that time on radio. It was like buying an hour of time, or at that time it was a half
Mm.
hour, and it was brought to you by American Mercury magazine,
Huh.
which was
Incredible.
owned right, which was owned by the then second host, if you will.
Orson Welles? Am I
No,
getting
of
this right?
Meet the
No.
Press. No, 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 no. This
Okay. Wasn't that his
the
show? Oh, it was owned by
Martha.
the, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, and he owned his, and that was something. He owned Meet the Press for a long time until NBC finally.
Huh.
Yeah, it was an interesting arrangement.
Yeah, yeah. This stuff that we grew up feeling, we sort of came up into a moment when it all seemed so stable, and that was itself kind of an illusion.
That's the thing that I keep trying to. I joke about this all the time in our politics. I think if you grew up at the time we grew up during the Cold War, and America was winning, and we won the Cold War. That was a big deal. But the Cold War also stabilized us as a country. It
Yeah.
stabilized our politics. The two parties agreed that we had to fight the Cold War. They may disagree on how to do it, but everybody agreed on what to do, and both parties kept their fringes. And now, if you look at our politics today, it's actually very similar to the politics pre-World War II. And it's very
Yeah, and
similar to the politics of the entire 19th century.
the media
Partisan
as
media,
well. Yeah,
partisan
exactly.
media. And so, in some ways, you and I've always wondered, did we grow up in an outlier period of the American story?
Totally. And I feel like it at times has really like affected my news judgment back poorly. Like it
Same.
leaves you with a sort of constricted sense of imagination about what could happen.
No, it absolutely. Well, it's funny you talk about who you write for with Semafor. So take the Epstein story.
Yeah.
I've noticed you have a lot of the content creators are manufacturing Epstein leads because that's how the distribution works, right? In order to get traffic
Yeah.
on any given day, you have to ride what people are on the
Yep.
algorithms.
Totally.
That's not how I think, and that's not how you think, and yet that's a business model for media, and it
Sure.
feels like a messy one, not a great one.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, the model is just like spreading absolute lies to get people's attention, right? I mean, the
Yep,
Epstein one is to me like, I mean, and I do think there's value to be had by trying to explain what's actually going on here, which is, this is the most
of course,
investigated story of the last 20 years by every
of
law
course.
enforcement agency, everybody who's listening to our phones, every journalist, every great journalist, and there's an enormous amount that's been reported, and specifically Gawker posted the quote unquote Epstein whatever list. It's his address book. It's been on the internet for like what 12 years.
Yeah,
It was like a medium-sized scoop in the year 2016, and and the Washington Post and others have documented in great detail his long and warm friendship with Donald J. Trump. Like, again, like not only not a news story of like the 1990s, like you could ask anybody in New York, like, oh yeah, they're friends, like not secret in any way. And then all this other stuff is basically made up. Like, it's to me like this is Pizzagate for people with college educations. Like Jeffrey Epstein, obviously horrific abuser of young women in Florida in the early aughts.
I
The
made
stuff
this
about
pizza
blackmail, the stuff about,
right.
I mean, it's
The
just
pe-
unsupported.
well, and this gets into something that I think it's been very hard to explain to the average person, which is the importance of pedophilia in every single scandal that the right wing has tried to create about the left, right? And that Epstein, like it's a weird thing. There's this weird Mike Flynn gave voice to it on X, but I think that's what made the Epstein story such a magnet for that
Do you
same
think it's
crowd.
just do you
It's a
think it's just the
dehumanizing.
right and the left? Because to me, it's like this is like
Well,
almost
pedophilia. What is
like
the
a
best
lizard.
way to?
It's like a lizard brain. Like this is
Sure,
good. Like it
but
just feels almost like because it's not just the right and the left. It's the blood libels against the Jews. It's all the left wingers who think that Donald Trump is secretly trafficking in young women. Right? Like it's to me like
well,
this
but
is
my
like the
point is,
ultimate conspiracy theory.
well, it's the ultimate dehuman. Like, what's the minute you
It's the worst
tag
thing you can
somebody,
imagine accusing someone
correct,
of.
right, and it becomes like the minute you throw it at somebody, it doesn't matter if it's true or not, right? Denial. All of a sudden, that's like this horrible thing has stuck to you, and I think that's what's made it a popular sort of word to use to attack an opponent because it's immediately dehumanizing, right? Right? Because
Yeah,
think
and I
about
think
it,
it does
like
tap
in
into almost like a mythological level of like I just think if you look back through like human history, people have conspiracy theories about children being
Mhm.
kidnapped. I mean, what's the Pied Piper, right? Like I just think this stuff is like really deep in our psyches and people are sort of programmed to believe it, like
Yeah,
we all are, and to pay
yeah.
attention to it, and it's hard to ignore, and it like hooks into something really deep in how people think about elites. Like what are the elites? What are the powerful people up to?
And that's yes, it's funny. It's like, and that's the and I guess the question, when does this end? Because I would argue it's always been there. It's just
Yeah.
the internet mainstreamed it.
The internet mainstreamed it. Musk's sort of like gloves off, we're not censoring anything X, sort of
Yeah.
really supercharged it on the right. I mean, I think that if you look back at what Aaron Burr was being accused of by Hamilton and why they dueled, like I think like really dark sexual smears are like very, very deeply connected to global politics always and probably not
And they
going
always have
away.
been. Yeah.
Yeah, just we grew up in a rare era when they were being pushed back into the fringes.
No, and this is where I come back with the Cold War. It turns out the only time we will act um, with some sensibility as a society is when there's an existential threat.
And then honestly, like only sometimes.
Well, not a pandemic. That's different. I do think pandemics are different, and history has shown that pandemics are actually always divisive. You know, this idea that it's only newly divisive, please go read about 1917. It's hugely divisive. Like pandemics have always been divisive between those that individual. It's human.
Yeah, but
It's a
wars
human.
basically. Yeah.
Right. It's always been a human. Individual rights versus collective action. Right. There's always
Yeah.
been this push and pull. Nobody has their finger on the pulse of New York City in the reporting world, I think, like you do. You're a believer in New York being the center of everything. And I say this in
It's
I'm
not so much a
fast.
believer. It's just I mean, I like it's like I believe that the way I like believe I should breathe air. I
I
mean, it's just a
understand that.
fact.
And I get it. I used to have, I remember one time having a fight with
I'm
Brian
saying I'm
Williams
not
about
making that claim. It's just how
no,
I
no, no,
see
no.
the world.
But you'll appreciate this. I remember one time they were showing the some local parade on the nightly news in New York. And I said, why are you doing that? Are you going to show the parade in Chicago and in St. Louis? And Brian goes, well, 1 in 9 Americans have a connection to New York City. And I said, so that means 8 in 9 Americans don't.
That feels very
And it
low to
was
me.
right. So there was this whole back and forth. But I set this up because this is one time where I am going to agree with you. What happens in New York City is going to reverberate around the world in this election. I think this is as big of an election as we've had. That's not a presidential in a long time. I mean, the Mamdani election, I think, is potentially this significant for the future of New York City. But I'm curious if you share that view.
It's interesting 'cause I think it will really reverberate, although sort of for the wrong reasons. Like, as is often true,
Sure.
like what's happening in New York is very weird and local. Like the path through which this guy shot up to the Democratic nomination and now
Mhm.
can't be stopped because because he's facing the worst candidates in the world is like very specific.
Mhm.
And I think not necessarily emblematic of what's happening if you look at the Senate primary in New Jersey across the river where Mikey
No,
Sherrill
it's
won.
not really.
Like
Yeah, it's not
it's
really
not
a movement.
representative of anything, except that you really do see, and you just feel it here, that the only people who have any energy is the real left, is the hard left. In the same way, I think that you could feel in Republican politics that the only people who had any energy was the Trump movement. Like that, and
Oh,
and there's passion and there's energy, and it's young people, and they're knocking on
yeah.
your door, and they have figured, and the thing that Mamdani really has, which I think the kind of previous iterations of the young left really didn't, is how to communicate with working people, with people who don't
Mhm.
share their ideology, with people who aren't interested in ideology, with people who don't want to learn some new language to talk about the world and talk about politics. Mamdani is not trying to persuade you of anything in particular about gender. He's not really interested in talking about the like control of the means of production. He's not
Mhm.
like, I mean, if you read if you are someone who like thinks maybe capitalism is good, you should like, and you read the DSA manifesto, like your hair will stand on end. But
Mhm.
Mamdani's not out there reading from the DSA manifesto. He's in some ways a very normal politician. I think in a way, I think the tradition that he's in New York is actually the last socialist mayor we had, who was Fiorello LaGuardia.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if he will pull that off, but LaGuardia was divisive in similar ways, actually was of the left in a pretty deep way. But also was like relentlessly focused on like building stuff and moving stuff around and cleaning up the garbage, which is what these municipal offices actually are.
No, I mean, look, I've always said I think the most impressive thing to me in government is how much garbage New York City deals with every day. I
And how
find it.
badly, we just put it in the fucking street. Like we
Oh,
just literally, like we just dump it in the street. No one else in the
and
world does this. We just
and it
piles
just
of
gets
garbage in the streets, and then the
and
rats eat it, and it smells. It's terrible.
but for the most part, it gets cleaned up every day.
Yeah,
For
no,
the
that is
most
true.
part, it's gone. Like I'm like it's one of those you're like, holy, I don't know another community. We sit here and
Yeah,
I always sit here and we love to beat the crap out of government. Government doesn't do this. Government doesn't do that. And then I'll say, I'm going to give you a piece of paper and a dollar bill. Can you take it across country in 3 days?
yeah.
Our government actually pulls that off for less than a dollar, and it's quite remarkable. And I sort of feel that we take for granted sometimes these mundane things that government does almost without us noticing.
Yeah, and in New York government, I mean, I mean, I guess, I mean, there's a shocking amount to me of optimism about Mamdani in town among people who
Well,
I
there's
would
no
be,
choice but to have optimism because he's going to win.
yeah,
Isn't that
and
the
I think,
problem? I
and
mean,
I
Cuomo and
think that's
Adams. I
right.
mean, you sit there, you're like, I
And
cannot believe that New York's political elite just sat on the sidelines while Cuomo came in and ran. What was anybody thinking? You have two of the leaders of the Democratic Party are both from Brooklyn, and they just what did they put like earmuffs on? They wanted to pay no attention to what was happening. It is the biggest sort of leadership failure of a political party that was happening right in their backyard, and they paid no attention to it until it was too late.
yeah, it's true. And Schumer and Jeffries could have said, "Hey, the guy is this other person," and almost anyone else. And Cuomo became the establishment candidate. And now we're in this situation where the people who everybody in New York hates most, which are billionaires who spout off on Twitter all the time,
And they're going to
are
fund these
basically
guys.
saying, we are gonna take not actually enough money to make it work, which is, by the way, $1 billion. That's what Bloomberg
Right.
spent, but a totally trivial amount of money, which isn't even enough to like, because New York is so expensive, so big. Like, you want to buy TV ads in New York, they're gonna put like $15 million in. That's what like T-Mobile spends in like 15 minutes. Like it's not a
It might get
meaningful
you a
amount of
couple of
money
taxi cab
to try
ads.
to bribe you to take some disgraced elderly gentleman, whether it's
Mhm.
Adams or Cuomo. They're deciding which one to try to force down the throats of the kind of, of New York voters who are kind of cynical about that exact move. Like, I actually think when people saw flyers and saw TV ads from these super PACs supporting Cuomo, I think regular voters thought, oh, this is who the billionaires are trying. This is the corrupt old guy the billionaires want us to vote for. Like, I think that's a real dynamic and problem. And Mamdani, like Trump, who was a very underfunded candidate in certain ways, pointed to the big money supporting his opponent and said, look at this. And people kind of got it.
Yeah. I mean, I never, I mean, it was like, look at the choices.
Yeah.
I never, and I don't know, is it just New York City? Is New York City government just not sexy enough for well-intentioned people to run for? I mean,
Well,
what happened?
no, there were
What happened to the
others.
woman who finished second
Catherine
last time?
Garcia. I mean,
Catherine Garcia. She seemed to me like, I go back. I think the sanitation department's the most impressive department in New York City. So you're like, you know what? You get that done. All right. I'm just
yeah, she was. I mean,
get it done.
Hold on. She was a solid civil servant, widely viewed as either the second or third best sanitation commissioner of the last 10 years. Like, okay.
Fair. Okay.
We're not talking about like and actually there were decent candidates. Brad Lander, the comptroller, good candidate. There was like a young YIMBY candidate. The energy is on the left. And Mamdani like captured, there was something this wasn't like an accident. He would have been, I think, in a different constellation with a stronger establishment contender than the Republican Party. Mamdani might still have won. Like there was something really real happening there.
If Hakeem Jeffries weren't basically the next potential Democratic speaker, I think he is the candidate that people want to run for mayor. No, I mean,
maybe,
in fact,
although I think he's
5 years ago, I thought he was that would be his next move.
Yeah, he could have been. He is sort of an unknown figure in New York. It's interesting because he's a very important national figure, but he's not. He's always been a kind of behind the scenes player, not a public figure. Like he's a classic legislative leader in that way.
Right.
And I think he could probably walk down the street in many parts of New York and no one would know who he was.
Interesting. And that's just because he's just not forced himself to be a New York presence the way even a Schumer did, right? Schumer wanted to be a
Schumer
president.
is unmissable. Yeah. My favorite line about Schumer, which is some roast, John Corzine, then the senator from New Jersey, said that sharing a media market with Chuck Schumer was like sharing a banana with a monkey. First, he eats the banana, then he flings his feces at you.
Oh my God. That's
Schumer did not appreciate it.
I'm sure he didn't. Are you surprised he still wants to be the Senate leader? Like, it does feel like he's staying past his sell-by date. And when you stay past your sell-by date, you risk, as Joe Biden is finding out, you risk really harming your own legacy unnecessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think he probably feels like a lot of these guys, a lot of legislative leaders in particular. The Biden thing, executives are different, but legislative leaders, you do build this kind of very specialized skill set, which is these relationships with, 48 or 52 very powerful, very eccentric people.
Right.
And you think no one else could do this job. And like, you see why he thinks that, right? Like,
sure,
that's a really strange, hard job. Like,
no, it is, because you just described it well. Most of its time is talking people off cliffs.
Yeah, and like, how do you get Chris Murphy to shut up about Palestine today? Like, I don't know, right? Like, but you do it because like there's this other thing in Connecticut. Like, who knows? But it's knowing that kind of stuff about these specific people, and then being able to raise tons of money. And so I think he probably thinks nobody else could do this job.
If AOC runs for president, what you sort of Chuck Todd of 10 years ago would have said nobody from New York City is going to be elected president of the United States. Well, obviously,
much less a backbench socialist congresswoman.
Right, exactly. I'm not ruling anything out for all the reasons you just described about Mamdani, which is,
me either.
Trump did everything the exact opposite of what Republicans thought they should do in order to win in 2016, and he won. And more importantly, he's reanimated a party. The Republican Party is now larger than the Democratic Party, and they did it by going harder right, not softer right, which was, of course, what was Mitt Romney. The post Mitt Romney recommendation was, no, you got to get softer. No, he went harder, and he diversified the party, and he made it different. For whatever you think, it's a different Republican Party, but he changed it. He changed the electorate more than he's changed the elected officials. So I'm not going to sit here and say that. So, what do you expect? What kind of national candidate do you expect her to be? And do you assume, by the way, I assume she's running. Do you?
I guess I think that she'd be crazy not to think hard about it. And I think part of it is, she initially had a really, I think, hard time dealing with the spotlight. Like there was there were a lot of threats against her, a lot of like that I think really rattled her personally. And
Mhm.
and you saw her kind of step back. And I do think like running for president is, it really changes your life forever. And I don't know
Forever.
where I don't know where she is on that. I think that's a real consideration for anybody in
And she
investors.
may want to have family. And this
And
is
people,
like she's
yeah,
in
and
prime
people
family mode,
people
potentially.
underestimate the extent to which like real personal decisions are a factor in it. I do think she shares with Trump at this point the fact she's a real celebrity, and that she's actually like she's better at this than people realize. Like
Oh,
people
I
like
think
if
she's
you
one. I call her a political. I like to use the phrase political athlete. I
yeah,
think
she's the real thing.
yeah, she's one
Like
of the best
she
political
like
athletes
in a big
out there.
room, in a small room. She also shares with Mamdani, and people don't realize this because, like with Trump, she's out there talking all the time. Whatever the most divisive thing she says is, as with Trump, gets clipped. And so with Trump, what his enemies missed was how funny he was, because all you
Yeah,
would see was some clip of him saying something like totally bananas. Half the time, it was in the context of a joke. And part of the joke was that the media is going to clip this and take it out of context, but you, my true follower, are in
right,
on the joke with me, right?
right.
And so, like, I think people missed a lot of his appeal because they processed him through short clips. And similarly with AOC, you can find clips of her saying very, very strident stuff. She actually shares with Mamdani, like, her style of communications is not hyperpolarizing. It is about
Mm-mm.
it's not about finding the sort of buzziest buzzword. It's the most alienating way to speak to people. Um, She's very, very talented. And I do think that the question is, which I think with Mamdani, there was also a sense, and I just like hear this from people who I had a very specific conversation with somebody we both know who's voting for Mamdani, that I was like legitimately shocked that she is voting
That
for
they were
Mamdani last
interesting.
night.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like not a person of the left, like at all,
Hmm.
like a person of the, active person of the Democratic Center. Um, and I do think, there's this sense of just like this is like particularly after the sort of Biden train wreck, we got to sweep everything aside. The whole system is broken. We got to blow it up. We need new
Yeah.
people. This guy is an instrument for that. And I think, the question is how many
That's
Democratic
interesting.
voters,
I remember a
like
lot
the
of
way people
Republican
saw Trump
voters,
as
by the
like,
way. I heard a lot of
yeah,
Republican voters
exactly.
in 16 going, I know who Trump is. I know he's full of shit. But you know what?
Yeah. He's a
We need to blow this up, and he's going to
right.
blow it
He's
up,
a
and we
hand
kind of need to,
grenade, right?
yeah. And they wanted
Right. Like
it.
I
That
don't
was an
like him, but
asset.
he's a hand grenade, and we're going to throw
Yeah.
this into
And
Washington.
Mamdani might be the hand grenade that
And
some
and AO,
people,
yeah,
yeah,
and AOC as a presidential candidate, like I think that if you just hate everything and
yeah.
that like all like the sort of establishment hates her, that just like even if you think all her policies are dumb, you could imagine people thinking like, wow, she's really going to make those people on TV mad.
Well, which is, I spent a lot of time in Northwest Florida, and which is a very conservative part of a conservative state,
Yeah,
and I've had people say, Trump was my middle finger, to
yeah,
all of you
exactly.
guys, and so in a form, in a way, Mamdani could be that. Um,
Or AOC. I mean, to put a point on it, though, I think
yeah,
the Democratic Party primary is going to start in South Carolina. You and
I
I
don't
have
believe
this
that.
very
I don't
strong.
believe
Oh,
that.
maybe. Oh,
I don't
really?
believe
Go
it
back. It's
will.
going to go back to New Hampshire,
I
Iowa.
think it may stop. Iowa, the likelihood Iowa elects a Democratic governor is in the 30 to 40% range. They have a legit guy,
Mm.
and it's kind of a mess on the right. And it's the same sort of setup as what happened in Kansas. Everybody's pissed off about school funding. It's one of those hyper
Oh,
local school
interesting.
funding has, all. Here's the problem in these conservative states that have a lot of rural areas. School choice in theory sounds good, but then if you live in certain areas, your choice is homeschool or the school, right? There isn't
Right.
really a choice. And Iowa was always very proud of its public school system. Iowa's always had a very strong one. When you look
Yeah.
at those national rankings, it was like Massachusetts, it's one. Iowa was always in the top five. So
Yeah.
and he's a pretty conservative D, right? He knows his state. He was
Hmm.
elected statewide. If he wins, I think the DNC goes back and sucks it up and
But
realizes, you know
but
what? It's better for the party to start in Iowa because you got to learn to talk to rural America. And it's the
right,
only
sure. And you're gonna have,
early place to do
you're
that.
gonna have a bunch of like Josh Shapiro's out there like
Sure.
developing like kind of like cornpone accents talking to rural
But guess
America.
what?
And
Obama
AOC is
figured
gonna
it out.
right,
And
and AOC
AOC
is gonna
will win the
come in
caucuses.
and
Yeah.
win the
And she'll win.
caucuses, just like
Right.
dominate Des Moines,
Just like
the
Obama did.
campuses. Yeah. And so you can, I guess, I think whether it starts there, I just think wherever it starts, you can kind of, because I think people always, I mean, this is just the eternal truth that people imagine in a national primary, and then it's
Yeah.
really a narrative. And you can
Right.
certainly tell yourself a story where
Mhm.
AOC comes in, she wins Iowa,
Sure.
loses New Hampshire, and then goes to South Carolina. And I think people, like, one of the really interesting things in the Mamdani race is that younger Black voters are not voting like older Black voters. And I
Well,
think
are
that,
we going to see that? We've never seen it yet in South Carolina. Will we see it? I don't know.
right, but I think there is, you could tell yourself a story where, like, you're starting to, where there's this, I think seasoned political hack reporters like us think, like, you know what, like, South Carolina is like mostly older, church-going, more women, Black voters, and that's the only people who vote, and it pulls the party back toward the center.
Well, that's
But
where
I think
Bernie
that, like,
Sanders went to die, right? Like
right,
that's where his
but right,
campaigns went to
and the
die.
progressives, like, just like fundamentally fail to connect with that group of kind of working people. They're more likely to vote for Donald Trump than Bernie Sanders at some level. I don't know if that's an eternal truth. I think one of you're seeing, Mamdani didn't beat Cuomo in Black districts like Cuomo, but
Well,
he
Cuomo's
did.
the mayor of Harlem, right?
But
He
he
did
picked
win
up. He
Harlem,
picked
right?
to the, well. It's confusing because Harlem's less Black than it used to be. But, like,
Fair, it's
the
Latino as well.
but
Right?
Cuomo, but Mamdani picked up a lot of, like, younger and working Latino votes, picked up a lot of South Asian votes, and then picked up, and just he brought Cuomo's margins down in the places that Cuomo really needed to win with working Black, with younger Black voters. And I think, like, maybe our sort of, some of our assumptions about the way democratic politics work might be a little off, and that in a way that could favor the left.
No, I am. In some ways, it's refreshing. I've never been more sort of like I am operating on a don't make any assumptions about previous history. Anything is possible. And here's the reality: three of the last four times that Democrats have elected a president, the person who won was not being talked about at this point in time in the conversation. In 1973, nobody was talking about Jimmy Carter.
Totally.
In 1989, nobody was talking about Bill Clinton. And in 2005, the Barack Obama conversation was, boy, maybe he'll be Hillary Clinton's running mate. Maybe he'll run for governor of Illinois and then run for president in 2012. But they weren't fully, it was really all about her, right? And so the point is that, and Pete Buttigieg, did anybody talk about Pete Buttigieg after his failed DNC race? Other than he was really good on television interviews. Maybe he ought to do something more, right? And all of a sudden he runs for president. And look, without COVID, I still think that thing comes down to Buttigieg and Sanders, not Biden.
So who aren't we talking about right now?
Well, if we were talking about them, then they wouldn't be there with right, like in some way. But that's my point. I think it's possible somebody who comes close to winning but doesn't in 26. Like Beto O'Rourke in 2018. Like, you could picture there's going to be different new candidates that can capture. Beto O'Rourke lost and had enough juice to be considered a serious presidential candidate.
The general. All right, here's my theory. Right? Zoran
does he run for governor?
Like, and somehow Eric Adams pulls it off,
and he runs for governor,
and just keeps running. Yeah. And then runs for president. Right. Yeah.
And I mean, the point is that that's not a crazy notion. That you could see that happen. Final topic I want to hit with you, and then I'll let you go. And that is, I think the most fascinating issue in the next Democratic primary is going to be Israel and the divide, and that's going to be the divide that probably gets overcovered by people like you and I. Right. The grid. We're probably going to over-index on it, fairly or unfairly. But in some ways, it will be.
When you say people like you and I, do you mean Jewish
reporters? Well, I don't. Right. That's the point. Like, no matter what, suddenly our religion matters when we're covering that issue, but not others. But anyway, but I digress. But look, it's always been tough for Jewish Americans that, like, hey, we think you can not like Bibi and be pro-Israel, right? The idea that there is a middle ground, but I don't know if the Democratic primary electorate is willing to have that nuanced debate. And I just think it's going to be an unpredictable litmus test. And I don't know what's the right answer as far as the politics of this going forward in the next couple of years.
I mean, I think people who worked with Mamdani wound up thinking that the Israel stuff was a net plus. The more people attack it,
in a primary,
there's an anti-Israel. There is an anti-Israel plurality or majority in that primary electorate. By the way, lots of Republicans hate Israel too. Good news. So, like, I think I think you'll see.
Well, anytime there's populism, the first.
I mean, I think there's also a question.
Every time there's a rise of
Yep.
populism, the first people targeted are the Jews, left or right.
Yeah, that's yep, for sure. No, I mean, sort of tied up with this idea around it. Yeah, anyway.
Mhm.
But and Mamdani, on one hand, I think was really unfair, was in some ways unfairly accused of overt anti-Semitism, of having said globalize the Intifada, when in fact he gave like a very Bill Clintonian nonsense defense of it, but never said it, whatever. Like, it's not what he ran on. But on the other hand, he is a very like committed pro-Palestine activist, right? Like
Right.
for all his and can talk about these issues very sure-footedly and fluently because he's been doing it for 15 years.
Right.
Um, and I think so. One question is how salient will it be, right? But I think right now it's a hugely salient issue, and Democrats are increasingly anti-Israel. And I think you're going to have you're I think you but I think you'll have a sort of normal Democratic platform that, when elected, I'm not going to I'm not saying I'll cut funding to Israel, but I want to pause funding and do a review, the way Trump just did with Ukraine, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
we're going to want to review how our aid to Israel is being used. I bet it's a formula like that, and you're going to see like that because yeah, I think are you going to keep funding the Netanyahu war
What does
machine?
Rahm
It's going
Emanuel
to be
say
like
on this question? That's been the, and when it comes close,
he tries to thread the needle and it doesn't work.
no, I
I mean, I don't
agree.
know,
And I
but
don't
me
know
like
what it looks
when
like.
I watched the New York results came in, my first reaction was forget Rahm's presidential campaign, and AOC is going to
Oh,
win. Think
wow.
much harder about it. Although
You just
whatever, they're
almost,
future cycles.
yeah. No, it's one of, to me, the hardest hurdle for him to overcome. And there's nothing he can do about it.
I
Right.
mean, it
There's not
reminds
a,
me a little of Trump in the Iraq War, right?
yeah.
Like when he just said like that war, you're an idiot, that your brother was an idiot, that war was a terrible mistake, or whatever he said. And it was sort of this unsayable thing that turned out to be quite obviously popular inside that party. I think Israel. I think partly it's just the nature of our incredibly polarized system, that the more closer Trump
Mm.
hugs Netanyahu, the more anti-Israel the Democrats are going to become.
And yet
I think I also think it's a feature of a sort of political media campaign to silence pro-Palestinian voices. Like, obviously that is a real thing. And what you see, like, if there's any lesson of like, how does it work when when powerful forces try to silence speech? Like, are we like, we're like, how did that work with vaccines? Like, we're now like incredibly, like an insanely anti-vaccine country.
well,
So I
look
don't
at
think that
deplatforming
campaign is
Trump.
going to work.
Right. I've
Yeah.
always said the biggest mistake, trying to deplatform Trump. What did he do? He built his own ecosystem, and now everybody's
No,
panicked that there's an alternative
I
ecosystem.
know. I know. And I do think it's strange to me that the people who actually really won that fight, the people on the far right, the anti-vaccine people,
Yeah.
um, are now, in many cases, are pushing very hard to silence voices they disagree with,
Well,
not really understanding where this is going to go, which
no, I
is, I
mean,
think,
they're
I think it's going to be I think it's going to lead to a huge anti-Israel backlash.
the
You sort of see it
overreach is
coming.
a. By the way, you see it a little bit. Like you were right. Like there's a lot of people on the right upset at Israel about the Syria bombing, right? Like that it was gratuitous and it was over the top, and you're starting to see, and even Trump. Whoa, what's going on here, right? Like there is a, you know, I,
Well, I mean,
and
MAGA
I'm
is a coalition that includes very, very pro-Israel people and and real anti-Semites.
right.
That's like a tough coalition to hold together,
I've
and people all
been
across the spectrum.
right. At some point, I think this pressure is going to break Bibi in Israel, but we keep waiting for that over and over. I mean, I do find it
Yeah, and I guess
interesting.
there's a question of, it as a non-Bibi Israel, can Democrats like find a way back to a non-Bibi Israel? I don't know.
Oh, I think so, but I mean, you know, I always find Israel. I'll throw one more question at you. Do you think that Israel's politics is our future, or did we export our politics to them? Meaning, I find it
Oh,
interesting that Bibi um, has gotten more and more power while also becoming less and less popular. Donald Trump's gotten more and more
yeah.
powerful, but he's arguably just as unpopular as he was when he began,
Mm.
right? In fact, we're starting to see. And yet, the left in Israel tried all sorts of ways to stop Bibi, right? They tried, and it's like same, and you're watching the left here in this country try all sorts of ways to stop Trump, and they've all failed. Like tried in a lawsuit, they tried creating a centrist party. That didn't work, right? Like they've tried all these things. I look at Israel and Bibi and think, hey, the left, the anti-Trump forces ought to spend more time studying the mistakes of the anti-Bibi forces in Israel.
What do you think? That's fascinating. What do you think those mistakes were? Like, what was the alternative?
Well, well, first of all, the Israeli Labor Party just sort of collapsed after the Rabin assassination, right? They arguably never recovered from that. They had their own scandal, but I think the assumption there was this assumption that somehow the further to the right that Bibi went, that it was going to alienate, and the fact is, it was Bibi being sort of always being tough to those forces trying to sort of get rid of Israel was always going to be better politics than whatever problems were domestically. And I think, for whatever reason, the two-state solution just never resonated as much as I think the left thought it would.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the whatever, however serious you think the problems are with immigration or the border, you can't really talk yourself into a world where you're about to be pushed into the sea, right? Which a lot of Israelis fear. Like the politics of
That's
fear
right.
in Israel are for like obvious reasons,
It's real.
much, much more
Yeah.
compelling. There's a lot more to be
Yeah.
afraid of.
No, and I think it's been a very effective way for Bibi to keep
Yeah,
power.
and I wonder if I mean, these sort of, to me, like where this analogy breaks down is you see the numbers of immigration like flopping all over the place right now. Like people were able to, like, doesn't seem like people are sort of sustaining their fear around immigration at all. I mean, that I find that fascinating. I don't really know what to make
Well,
of it.
uh, what's happening here on immigration?
Yeah, yeah, right now.
Well, I
Like, it
think
seems like
it's
Trump's doing what he promised, and it seems not popular. And it was
well
popular when he promised it, and he succeeded
because
on the border.
but
And
I think that was the mistake. The question was, what were people upset about, the border or immigration? They were upset about the
right,
border, and I
yeah,
think I think that Stephen Miller actually wants to, he had a different agenda, right?
yeah,
He believed immigrants were taking jobs from Americans. I think he
yeah, and he
fully,
wants like
I,
fewer taco restaurants and more
That's
hamburger
right.
stands.
He
Yeah,
he wants a more American culture, a Eurocentric American culture, and so that is, I think that's what's unpopular. I think the border security was popular. I think
yeah,
what was unpopular. I was reading something the other day about, sort of in some ways immigration, the politics of immigration have been exactly the same, which is, Americans love the immigrants that they know, and they don't like the immigrants they don't know, and that's always, and which is ultimately why Americans are recoiling at, why are you getting rid of these people that are making chicken affordable? Why are you getting
yeah,
rid of these people that are making produce affordable? What are you doing? Hey, that person that cleans my house, she's terrific. She's not a criminal. Why are you attacking her? Why are you scaring her? Right? I think, and ultimately, we're still there. It's right. Look at how many times you can write the story of, well, I voted for Trump, but I didn't want that immigrant to get
yeah.
deported.
So do you think Trump
We
backs off
like
it?
100%, because he's a hotel person. He gets it.
Yeah.
Every time that argument's been made to him, he gets it. And I, at some point, because the polls are showing this is not popular. The question I have is, does he turn on Stephen Miller on this? Or does Stephen Miller realize, is he smart enough to realize what's coming, and
Yeah, I
he
mean, they just
morphs,
passed all that money for ICE.
right?
Like, but I don't think more guys in mass chasing people around the interior is going to be a popular thing to do with it.
It hasn't been.
Maybe they
The
can
numbers keep,
redeploy to chasing journalists around.
I mean, John Ellis's Substack today had a terrific lead, which was, Trump's never gotten more of what he's wanted in 6 months, right? No president has gotten this much of what they've wanted in 6 months than him. By the way, have you noticed how unpopular he is right now?
Yeah.
And it's across the board, right? None of his policies are seen as a net positive right now. Not tariffs, not immigration. And you're just sitting there going, oh,
Weird country where we elect a guy who promises all these things and then just immediately despise him when he does them.
but isn't it proof we weren't voting for anything? We've just been voting against. And this was like, no, Biden and Harris didn't know what they were doing. Get them out.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well,
Semafor.
looking forward to
Who is your
President
let's
AOC.
let me close with this. Who is I think every news organization, you need to know who you need to have somebody you compete with, even if you're not really a competitor. Who do you view as Semafor's competitor? Is it the New York Times? Is it Axios? Is it BBC? Who is it?
I mean, I think a lot about the FT. I think that's a great publication, but also like a lot of, gosh, I think they were founded in the 19th century, so it was possible it was like the 16th being Britain. But I think
Yeah,
there's an opportunity to build a kind of modern caffeinated version of the Financial Times and the other thing that I think we really see ourselves competing with is the World Economic Forum in Davos. Like that is a
interesting.
fascinating institution that is, of also very rooted in the 20th century.
Are you worried at all about being too associated with the wealthiest of folks? Do you know what I mean? Like when we're having this sort of weird sort of populist moment, frankly, around the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think that would be a great problem to have.
That's a good problem.
I mean, I'm like if the peasants with pitchforks are gathering around Semafor's headquarters, like that
That
would
means
just
you've
be a
succeeded.
moment of great brand recognition for us. Yeah, I think we're not quite there yet.
Do you think the wealthy realize the pitchforks are coming for them or not?
It's the right now, like I mean, somebody said this to me, like the the millionaires voted for Mamdani and the billionaires are the ones freaking out. Like, I mean, it's a funny moment where that you also have these kind of billionaire populists, well, I don't know. It's a very, I mean, I think obviously inequality is this huge thread in politics, but the way in which the billionaires are now themselves these sort of aggrieved political
Mhm.
actors is a really strange twist. Like, I don't think that I think Elon Musk and Bill Ackman
Oh
earnestly
my
consider
God.
themselves the voices of the people.
Bill Ackman really thinks he's a victim.
I mean, it's incredible to watch, but it's also these guys, they're sort of the fact that they now are sort of publicly intervening on
Yeah.
behalf of these political candidates. I mean, it's just poison politically.
No, it really is. I mean, yeah, right.
We
If
saw it
one of
with
those,
Musk. Like no
right, if
one
one of
wants
those,
the richest man in the world to tell them how to vote. The people hate these people.
ask that poor conservative judge that ran in Wisconsin, please
Yeah,
don't give me
exactly.
your endorsement, Elon Musk. You've
Yeah.
literally made things worse.
No, and I think right now this sort of like whatever small hope the very troubled but maybe possible Andrew Cuomo and Eric Adams campaigns had has
Mm.
basically been snuffed out by the panic of elite. Like the whole narrative being like the elite billionaire, not even business owners, not people who operate, not New York employers. We're not talking about like, I mean, I'm sure the CEO of Pfizer is freaking out too. But we're talking about money, hedge fund managers and short sellers
Hmm.
who often spend like 179 days in the city, so they don't have to pay local taxes. Are having these huge public freakouts. These are not beloved civic leaders.
If
Anyway.
Jessica Tisch were on the ballot, would she be the next mayor?
Yeah, I think she probably would have been. I think it's late now, but I think had she gotten in initially, she'd be a very strong candidate. I mean, she's
Are you
the when you
you
when you
surprised
mentioned,
she didn't? Yeah, are you surprised she didn't get pushed into this by like a Bloomberg, who could have probably talked her into it?
I don't know, she's not somebody else who can be talked into anything because
Doesn't need to
she
be. Yeah, she's a Tish
she
Tish,
has her
right?
own money too. It's funny because there is a great tradition in New York of the city being, and this isn't a very small d democratic tradition, but if you think about, there was a period where New York was kind of run by the scions of these great New York, mostly kind of our crowd Jewish families, the Morgenthau's,
Hmm.
Robert Moses, like who felt to some degree like they owned the place because they
Hmm.
did, and operated with a level of kind of noblesse oblige, actually. And she's certainly the inheritor. And I think that's actually a great tradition. Like it's some
Yeah,
problems with it, but like there's something nice about that tradition of people
yeah.
who really feel a commitment to the civic life of the city and feel grateful and feel a level of gratitude about what they were given and are incredibly intense, hardworking public servants. And she was showing up at 4 a.m. for sanitation roll calls when she was a great sanitation commissioner. Like she sort of embodies that. I think like he's a tough, driven, driving manager. That's not always the personality type of a politician. And I think there's a question of does she want the political job? But I think, people think she's doing a pretty good job running this government agencies she runs. So I assume if she wants to be mayor at some point, she can be.
I was just going to say two of the most difficult ones can be police commissioner, sanitation, and the only other tough one I would argue before mayor would be the education uh, head, because that has had
Yeah.
its moments as well. So the fact that
Yeah,
she's can
that's the
check those
thing with
boxes.
Zoran Mamdani. Like, yeah, and that's the thing with Zoran Mamdani. He's gonna like, or whoever is mayor. It's $120 billion budget, and you just like the schools either get better, they're gonna get worse. and the subways can get more or less dangerous. Like, it's an immediate, constant crisis of a job. It's not an ideological sort of, like, the garbage can get picked up or it's not. And if one snowstorm goes wrong, like, that's the end. So yeah.
Well, Ben, I'm
It's
so glad. I
fascinating.
feel like you're a real New York City sort of savant. I don't know what else to call it. Like,
Well, I
you
take
love
that
the
as like
city.
that's like
Yeah.
genuinely the nicest thing you could possibly have said about me. So I really appreciate it. That's like the
No, you
compliment I've
love
always been fishing for.
because you do. You love the city, right? I mean, you do. You feel like you're of the city, and you're never going to leave it, are you?
No, I think I'm not. I think I'm
Yeah.
stuck here.
No, I
Um,
get it. I get it. It's not. I grew up in the sixth borough of New York. It's called Miami, so I get it.
well, it's always so fun to talk to you, Chuck. Thanks for
All right,
having
my
me on.
friend. Well, I love Semafor. By the way, I subscribe. My favorite two newsletters to read, actually, this was are the Africa newsletter and the Gulf States newsletter,
I'm
because
glad. I think those are very hard to match.
yeah, exactly. I get that information nowhere else. Nowhere else. A little like you're right about the FT. Every once in a while, FT, but not like what you guys are doing. And just, I've always feel uninformed about Africa. This newsletter has made me feel much more informed about a continent that the most news organizations ignore. So kudos. And like I said, keep it up and keep it free for us independent people.
Well, thank you, Chuck.